A sealed envelope sat on the floor of a hospital parking garage in Edmonton, Alberta, at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. Inside it, $6,200 in cash, a signed power of attorney for a company valued at $340 million, and a photograph of a little boy standing in the snow outside a house that no longer existed. The woman who dropped it didn't notice. She was already in the elevator, already thinking about the meeting in Calgary at 7 the next morning. The man who found it was mopping the concrete floor of level P2, making $14.75 an hour, and he hadn't eaten since noon. He didn't keep it. He drove 38 kilometers through an Edmonton January, -29 with the wind, in a 2007 Dodge Caravan with a cracked heater core and a front right tire that had been slowly dying for 3 weeks. And what happened when he found the woman who owned that envelope would cost him something he didn't expect to lose, and give him back something he didn't know he was missing. Vivienne Marsh had not always eaten dinner alone. There was a time not that long ago on paper, but a lifetime ago in feeling, when the kitchen of the house on Saskatchewan Drive smelled like cardamom and burnt toast because her husband Owen burned every piece of bread he'd ever made and refused to acknowledge it. When her daughter Simone would sit on the counter, swinging her legs and talking about nothing important while Vivienne cut vegetables, and the dog, a ridiculous golden retriever named Bus, would sit beneath the cutting board waiting for something to fall. That version of her life ended on a Tuesday morning in February 7 years ago, when Owen's truck was hit on the Yellowhead at 7:14 a.m., and the paramedics who reached him first knew, before they touched him, that there was nothing left to do. She did not fall apart. That was the thing people always said about Vivienne Marsh, as if it were a compliment. She did not fall apart. She sold the house on Saskatchewan Drive because she could not bear the smell of it. She moved into a condo near the river with windows that let in the kind of light Owen would have hated. She went back to work at Northgate Property Group 11 days after the funeral because being still felt like drowning. And she built 6 years of 18-hour days and decisions that made the board uncomfortable, and a reputation for being brilliant and impossible in equal measure. Northgate grew from a regional mid-size firm into something that attracted attention from Vancouver, from Toronto, from funds she'd only ever read about. By the time she was 53, Vivienne Marsh ran a company valued at $340 million and ate dinner at a desk in an office that faced the river she no longer took time to look at. She had a daughter. Simone was 26 now, living in Montreal, working at an architecture firm, and they spoke on the phone every 2 weeks in the careful way that people speak when they love each other, but have stopped knowing how to say it. Their last real conversation had ended badly. Simone had said something true, and Vivienne had responded the way she always responded to true things she wasn't ready to hear, by pivoting to something practical, something solvable, something that wasn't the actual problem. "You've been gone for 7 years, Mom." "Not dead. Gone. And I can't keep." She hadn't finished the sentence. Vivienne had waited, but Simone hadn't finished it, and the silence had filled with everything neither of them knew how to say. That was 4 months ago. On this particular Tuesday in January, Vivienne left the hospital after visiting a member of her board, a routine thing, a courtesy, the kind of thing her assistant scheduled and her calendar flagged, and she showed up to without particularly wanting to. She was thinking about the Calgary meeting. She was thinking about the clause in paragraph 7 of the Harlow acquisition draft that her legal team had flagged that afternoon. She was not thinking about the envelope she had pulled from her bag in the elevator on the way down, the one her assistant had handed her that morning, the one she'd been meaning to file in her car and had instead left resting against her coat as she stepped into the parking garage at level P2. She did not feel it go. The envelope landed flat on the concrete. It looked, from above, like a piece of litter, just another thing the cleaning crew would deal with. The cleaning crew was Noel Adeyemi. Noel was 28 years old and had been working the overnight maintenance shift at the University of Alberta Hospital for 14 months. He'd taken the job because it paid $14.75 an hour with shift premiums, and because the hours, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., meant he could spend days doing the thing that was slowly eating him alive with equal parts hope and self-doubt, studying for the Red Seal exam. He was trying to become a journeyman electrician. His father, Emeka Adeyemi, had come to Edmonton from Lagos in 2003 with a temporary foreign worker permit and a plan that involved a lot more certainty than it deserved. The plan had worked, technically. Emeka got his papers, sponsored his wife Ada and their son Noel, worked 16 years for a construction outfit in Sherwood Park before his back gave out. A workplace injury. A settlement offer that his employer's lawyers had written to be just small enough that fighting it would cost more than accepting it. Emeka didn't have a lawyer. He didn't know he could get one on contingency. He took the settlement and spent the next 4 years watching it disappear into physiotherapy bills and a mortgage on a house in Mill Woods that had needed a new roof the year they bought it. Noel had watched all of this from the kitchen table where he did his homework. He'd learned to read receipts the way some kids learn to read weather. Could tell by his mother's grocery choices in the third week of the month how the finances were running. Could hear in the way his father came home from physiotherapy appointments whether the pain was better or worse. Could calculate, without being taught, the precise relationship between the number of double shifts his mother Adiezi picked up at the care home where she worked and the amount of heat in the house that month. He was not resentful. He was precise. He wanted to become an electrician because tradespeople in Alberta could not be outsourced. Because an uncle in Brampton had gotten his Red Seal and now ran a small crew and owned his house outright. Because when Noel was 14 and the power had gone out in the Mill Woods house during a January cold snap, an electrician had come and fixed the problem in 20 minutes and charged $280 for the visit, and Noel had done the math and thought, I want to be the person who knows how to fix things other people can't. The Red Seal exam cost $125 to register. The preparation materials he needed, 2 textbooks and access to a practice exam platform, ran to $340. He had $190 saved. He was 8 weeks away from being able to register, assuming nothing broke, assumed the caravan's tire held, assumed his father didn't have another bad month. The tire had been slowly losing pressure since October. The mechanic on 34th Avenue had told him in November that the sidewall was compromised and he needed a new one. A new tire would cost $180. He'd bought a portable air compressor instead for $47 and topped up the pressure every 3 mornings in the parking lot before work. He'd already taken the exam once. Failed by 6 points. Not because he didn't know the material. His instructor at NAT had told him plainly that his technical scores were strong. But because he'd written the exam on 4 hours of sleep after covering a double shift for a coworker who'd called in sick, because refusing the shift would have cost him $190, he could not give up, because the exam date had been booked 4 months in advance and rescheduling would cost $75 he didn't have, and another 3-month wait he couldn't stand. 6 points. He still thought about those 6 points sometimes at 3 a.m., pushing a mop through the fluorescent silence of level P2. He was doing exactly that when he saw the envelope. It was lying flat near the elevator entrance, slightly under the wheel stop for parking spot 14. He almost pushed past it. Instead, he stopped, bent down, picked it up. Sealed. Addressed to no one. But not light. He felt that immediately, the density of it, the way it sat in his hand. He stood up and looked toward the elevator, then toward the exit ramp, then down at the envelope again. He opened it slowly. The cash was banded. He counted it carefully, the way a person counts something they cannot believe is real. 6,200, 6 banded hundreds and a loose 200. He set the money on the concrete beside him and looked at the other contents. A legal document, dense with language, with a name at the top, Northgate Property Group Inc., and a signature line where someone named Vivienne Marsh had already signed in blue ink. And then, tucked beneath the document, a photograph. A boy, maybe 4 years old, in a red snowsuit, standing in front of a house. Snow piling on the porch railing. The boy was laughing at something outside the frame. On the back, in the kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who was taught to write by nuns, Owen. First snow, November 2001. Noel looked at the photograph for a long time. $6,200. He sat with that number the way his father had once sat with the settlement offer. Not stupidly, not naively, but honestly, with full awareness of what it meant and what it could do. It was 3.5 months of his wages. It was his Red Seal registration, both textbooks, the practice platform, a new tire, and 4 months of his father's supplementary physiotherapy, the kind the provincial plan didn't cover. It was the thing standing between him and the version of his life that existed just past this one, close enough that he could almost feel the temperature difference. There were no cameras in level P2. He'd noticed this his first week on the job. The camera at the elevator covered the doors but not the floor. Where he was standing was technically unwatched. He stood there for 2 full minutes. Then he folded the document carefully, put the photograph back against it, banded the cash back the way he'd found it, and slid everything into the envelope. He looked at the legal document again. Northgate Property Group. He'd seen the name before. There was a Northgate development going up on 102nd Avenue, the kind of project that had big signs out front with the company name in corporate blue. He took a photo of the company name with his phone. Then he sealed the envelope as best he could, tucked it inside his jacket, and finished mopping level P2. At 6:18 a.m., still in his uniform, he sat in his van in the hospital parking lot and searched Northgate Property Group on his phone. The website loaded slowly on his data. The About page had a photograph of a woman in a dark blazer, silver-streaked hair, standing in front of an Edmonton skyline. Vivienne Marsh, President and CEO. He found the general contact number. He called it at 8:02 a.m., when the office would be open, sitting in the van in the hospital lot, running the heat on low because he was almost out of gas. The receptionist who answered was politely confused by what he was describing. She put him on hold. He waited 4 minutes. A different voice came on, an assistant probably, who asked him carefully what exactly he had found and where he had found it. He explained. There was another pause. Vivienne Marsh was already in Calgary. She had left at 5:30 a.m. in a company car, and she had discovered the envelope was missing at 7:55 a.m. in the lobby of a glass building on 8th Avenue, when she reached into her bag and found nothing. The signed power of attorney had to be in that building by 10 Lycere a.m. Without the original signature page, not a scan, the original, the Harlow acquisition did not close. A deal 14 months in the making, $112 million in financing arranged, 4 law firms and 6 months of due diligence, and it all rested on a piece of paper sitting in a hospital parking garage in Edmonton. Her assistant called Noel back at 8:09 a.m. By 8:45 a.m., Noel was driving south on the QEII in the caravan with the slow tire and a cracked heater core and the envelope on the passenger seat, having agreed, without fully understanding the urgency, but understanding that it was real, to drive the original document to a courier depot in Leduc that could get it to Calgary by 11 a.m. if it arrived by 9:30. He made it by 9:22. The envelope went into the courier's hands with 8 minutes to spare. Vivienne got the call at 9:51. The document would arrive in time. She stood in the lobby of the Calgary building and thought, who is this person? The acquisition closed at 2:17 p.m. At 4:30, driving back to Edmonton in the company car, Vivienne had her assistant pull everything that was publicly available on Noel Adeyemi. Not surveillance. Public records, LinkedIn, the N8 continuing education portal. Enough. By the time she was past Red Deer, she had read it twice. She called her assistant back and said, I need to meet him, not at the office, wherever he's comfortable. They met at a Tim Hortons on 34th Avenue, because that was the closest thing to neutral ground that made any sense, and because Noel had suggested it without thinking, and then spent 20 minutes in his van wondering if that had been the wrong call. It wasn't. Vivienne walked in wearing jeans and a coat that cost more than his monthly rent, ordered a large double-double without looking at the menu, and sat down across from him like a person who was not sure what she was going to say. How much do you want? She asked. Not thank you. Not how did you find us. Not are you all right. Just, how much? Noel looked at her. For the drive to Leduc, he said. I figured gas. Maybe $40. Vivienne set her cup down. That document, she said, was worth 112 seal to close. Noel nodded slowly. I figured it was important. You could have kept the cash. It wasn't mine. She looked at him. 40 seconds passed. He met her eyes the whole time, not defiantly, just steadily, the way a person looks when they are not performing anything. The photograph, Noel said. Of the boy. That's what I kept thinking about, actually. Something moved in Vivienne's face that she did not quite manage to keep still. His name was Owen, she said. My husband. That was him at 4 years old. She paused. He died 7 years ago. I'm sorry. You drove to Leduc with his photograph. I drove to Leduc with your envelope. She looked at the table. Her hands were wrapped around the coffee cup. For a moment, Vivienne Marsh, who had not fallen apart, who had been back at her desk 11 days after the funeral, who had built a $340 million company on the other side of grief that nobody at the company knew she was still carrying, looked like a person who might, after all, be carrying something too heavy for one person. The cash, she said. That's almost 4 months of your wages. I know, and you needed it. It wasn't a question. She had read the public records. She knew about Enite. She knew about the failed exam. Noel looked at her. He thought about lying. Not dramatically, just the small version of lying that people do when they don't want someone's pity. The shrug, the it's fine, the I manage. He didn't. I needed it, he said. Yeah, then why? He set his own coffee down. He looked at the window for a moment, at the parking lot where his van was sitting with the slow tire and the portable compressor in the back. Then he looked at Vivienne Marsh and said the thing his father had told him. When he was 11, when a boy at school had stolen his lunch money, and Emeka had asked him what he'd done about it, and Noel had said he'd asked for it back, because my dad came to this country with nothing, he said, and he never once took something that wasn't his. Even when taking it would have been easy, even when nobody would have known. And I understood when I was still pretty young that that's not about money. That's about what kind of person you decide to be when no one's keeping score. My dad says the score doesn't matter. The decision does. Vivienne didn't answer for a long moment. Then she said, my husband used to say something like that, almost exactly like that. She reached into her bag and put $500 on the table. Noel looked at it. For your time, she said. I appreciate that, he said. I really do, but I didn't return the envelope for payment. I know you didn't. Then we're settled. She slid the money back toward herself. Then she did something she had not planned to do. She put the money back in her bag and instead put something else on the table. A business card. Hers. I'd like to hear about the Red Seal, she said. Not as a transaction. I'd like to hear about it, he told her. The way he tells things, factually, without drama, which somehow makes it hit harder than drama would. The exam, the 6 points, the tire, the exam fee, the double shift, the 4 hours of sleep. His father's back, his mother's double shifts. The uncle in Brampton. The reason he chose electrical, which had something to do with a cold January night and an electrician who fixed the problem in 20 minutes and knew exactly what he was doing. Vivienne listened without interrupting once. There is a thing that happens, in Alberta, in skilled trades, that most people in glass office towers on the 34th floor never see. The province runs on pipelines and refineries and infrastructure that requires people who know how electricity moves and how to keep it from killing someone. And yet the path to becoming one of those people costs more than most of the people who need those jobs can easily afford. The Red Seal exam, the apprenticeship hours, the materials. For someone without family money or a line of credit, the gap between wanting the certification and holding it is not a gap of ability. It is a gap of about $800 and one good month. Noel was 8 weeks from his next attempt. He knew this without her saying it. I'm not offering charity, Vivienne said. I need you to hear that clearly. What I'm offering is a practical arrangement that benefits both of us. Noel waited. Northgate has 17 active construction projects in Edmonton right now. We use 5 electrical contractors. One of them retired in November, and we haven't replaced the contract. I need someone who is good at what they do, who shows up on time, and who I can trust to be in rooms with documents worth $112 million, without my having to worry about what happens when I'm not looking. She paused. I'm not there yet with you. But I'd like to be. She slid the business card a little further toward him. Pass the exam, she said. When you have your certificate, call me. I can't promise you a contract. I can promise you an honest evaluation, a real conversation, and a reference that means something in this city. She stood up, buttoned her coat. The $6,200 is in the envelope on the table, she said. I need you to know I'm not asking you to earn it back. It was yours to return and you returned it. That's done. But the exam materials, the registration, consider that covered. No strings. I'm not buying your character. I'm just removing one obstacle that shouldn't be there. She left before he could answer. He sat with his coffee until it was cold. On the envelope, in her handwriting, she had written a single line. A receipt almost. What you returned cannot be bought. Noel passed the Red Seal exam 11 weeks later. He called her on a Wednesday afternoon in April, from his van in an N8 parking lot, hands still shaking from reading the result. She answered on the second ring. I passed, he said, a pause, not long. The kind that means something. I know you would, she said. He didn't know if that was true. But it didn't matter. Somebody had said it, and it sounded like something's solid to stand on. 3 months later, Noel Adiemi's name was on a subcontractor agreement with Northgate Property Group. A 1-year contract to start. Real work, real pay. Work that put him in buildings going up across the north side of Edmonton. Work that built the kind of resume that would mean something in a year and 2 years and 5. His father drove out to one of the job sites the second week. Emeka Adeyemi stood in the unfinished corridor of a mid-rise on 111th Avenue and watched his son work, and did not say anything for a long time, and when he did speak, he said it in Yoruba, the way he said the things that mattered. Noel didn't catch every word. He caught enough. Vivienne was changing too. Not loudly. Quietly, the way rivers change course. You don't notice until you look at where you started and see how far the bank has moved. She started leaving the office before 7 p.m. twice a week. Small thing. Enormous thing. She started returning calls that weren't about business. A cousin in Victoria she hadn't spoken to in 2 years, a friend from university who had emailed 3 times without a response. She hung Owen's photograph, the one from the envelope, the one of the boy in the red snowsuit, on the wall of her office, not in a drawer, not folded in a document sleeve, on the wall, where she could see him from her desk. She called Simone on a Sunday afternoon. Not on schedule. Not on the bi-weekly calendar reminder. Just called. Simone answered, carefully, the way she always did now. I want to tell you something, Vivienne said. I met someone. Not like that. A young man in a parking garage. He found something I lost and drove it 90 kilometers in a van that probably shouldn't have made the trip in the middle of January for no reason except that it wasn't his. And it. She stopped. Started again. He reminded me of your father. The version of your father I met before I knew him well enough to know all of him. The version that just did the right thing without needing an audience. Simone was quiet on the other end. I think I've been doing your father wrong, Vivienne said, in how I've been carrying it. Not wrong about loving him. Wrong about what he would have wanted for the next 20 years. He wasn't the kind of man who would have wanted me to eat dinner alone. A pause. Long. The kind that fills slowly. Mom, Simone said, and nothing after it, for a few seconds. I've been waiting for you to say something like that. I know. I'm sorry it took this long. They talked for 2 hours, not about logistics, not about practical things, about Owen, about the house on Saskatchewan Drive, about Bus the dog and the burnt toast, about all the things that were still there, still real, still worth talking about, because grief is not a reason to stop talking about the person. Grief is sometimes just love with nowhere left to go, and a conversation is somewhere. At the end, Simone said, I want to meet him, the parking garage guy. Vivienne laughed. It surprised her. The sound of it, how it came out before she could shape it. He's not really a parking garage guy anymore. You know what I mean. They met at Noel's family's house in Mill Woods because Adeze Adeyemi had insisted on cooking and nobody told Adeze no when she'd decided to cook. The kitchen smelled like jollof rice and something frying in the pan on the back burner, and Bus, not a golden retriever. Simone's old dog was gone, but a ridiculous neighborhood cat named something in Yoruba that translated loosely to persistent, was sitting on the counter watching the stove with the confidence of an animal who had never been told it wasn't allowed anywhere. Simone stood in the doorway of that kitchen and looked at Vivienne. Vivienne looked back. Nothing was fixed. Simone's relationship with her mother was not fixed by a Sunday phone call or a dinner in Mill Woods. Vivienne still ate alone most nights. The space where Owen had been was still the exact shape of Owen, and nothing fills a shape like that perfectly. Noel still had the tire issue, and his father's back was going to be his father's back for the rest of his father's life. But Simone reached across and squeezed her mother's arm, and Vivienne let her, and that was something. That was the beginning of something, which is different from nothing in ways that matter. That January, the year after, Vivienne drove herself to the hospital for a board visit. Same hospital, same parkade, level P2. She parked in spot 12, walked to the elevator. In her bag was the envelope, the real one, the original, that she'd had couriered back from Calgary. She kept it now. Kept Owen's photograph in a frame on her office wall and the envelope in a drawer of her bedside table, because some things are worth keeping close, even if you can't fully explain why. She pressed the elevator button, waited. A young man came around the corner with a mop and a cart, earbuds in, head down, moving with the specific efficiency of someone who had a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time to cover it. He stopped when he saw her waiting, pulled one earbud out. "Evening," he said. "Elevator's a bit slow tonight." "Thank you," she said. She meant it. The elevator arrived. She stepped in, turned around. The doors began to close. The young man was already moving, mop in hand, head back down, studying something. She looked closer. A page of notes, laminated, clipped to the cart. Studying on the job. Covering the ground. The doors closed. Vivienne rode up alone and thought about her daughter and thought about her husband and thought about a 28-year-old who had driven 90 kilometers in a January that could have stranded him. For no reward except the one his father had taught him you could not put in a wallet. The score doesn't matter. The decision does. The elevator opened on the 4th floor. She walked out into the light.